Howdy.
Howdy. How are you doing, Mr. Vaush?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Mr. Logic Guy?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for asking. How was the Tucker Carlson speech? Excellent, I assume.
It is the greatest act of violence a conservative has managed to inflict on me in some time, and in that respect, he won and I lost.
Wow. Yeah, it certainly went on for a long time.
It felt like it, that's for sure. Even if it
That
had
guy
gone
can
on for
talk.
5 minutes, I think I would agree with you. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm just looking to do some free speech discourse from an apparent free speech extremist,
Yeah,
as I've been described
uh,
earlier in this stream.
as it's been said. Yeah, wait, hold on. Say who you are and also say your pronouns, because my chat loves knowing pronouns. Love being aware of them.
Logic guy, he, him, they, them will do in a pinch.
Nice. Now they have variety. All right, hit me up. Why did you want to talk to me this fine day? Give us some context.
So I specifically wanted to respond to a take of yours I saw that was clipped by Mr. Greenwich Greenwald.
Yes.
You saw the one I'm talking about. Should we? I don't know if we can play it or if I should just like recap it. I don't know.
Give the gist. I'll look for the clip and maybe I'll play it
Oh,
if I can
I can
find it.
send it to you right now. I got it on my desktop.
Oh,
I'm just
sure. Yeah,
gonna
hit me up.
upload it and you can play it. Upload a file.
I love Glenn Greenwald, and he likes me too. He tweets about me pretty often.
he, man, I'll try to send it to you on Twitter. I always have trouble sending clips on
Discord
Discord.
sucks. Yeah,
Let me try it on
just
Twitter.
tweet me in. It's all good.
Yeah, here we go. There you go. You watched the clip. Would you say that it accurately characterized you? I wouldn't want it if it's like something that like was clipped in a deceitful way.
Yeah, well, as soon as I see the clip, I'll tell you. I get clipped a lot. You know, I don't have the best memory for these things. Um, was it the 2 minute long one I was talking about? What was it bans on
Right.
Twitch or bans on Twitter? Was this in response to the Cracker discourse? Or, sorry, the Sea Slur discourse.
I don't think it had anything to do with crackers or bands, as far as I know.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, here we go.
yeah, it should be up in the Twitter chat.
Yeah. Okay. Here, let me play. I'll let
I
you
don't know
know
if
when
you
it's
can
done.
play it.
Okay. I'll let you know when it's done. 'Cause I'll just play it out.
All right, go for it.
Free speech is only
Okay.
valuable socially if it is
I
meaningful
thought we were
and if
gonna
it
actually
helps
the
us
audience was gonna
arrive
be able to
at
see it, but
moral and
that's fine.
truthful positions. If people use their right to free speech to spread misinformation, which leads demonstrably to harm of innocent people, that would be an element of our free speech which we must excise in order to preserve the value of free speech itself. Free speech has absolutely no meaning, no worth, no utility, no value in a society, in a system where we do not hold people to account for vicious untruth. That is entirely opposed to the objectives of free speech. Is that still free speech, lol? Yes. If you want to maximize any social principle, you have to build walls around it. Same with freedom, after all. We make society more free by outlawing murder, even though to outlaw murder, you are necessarily imposing rules on people that did not exist prior. Anyone who's a free speech extremist or an anything extremist, what you're really doing is opening up whatever you claim to value to undermine from the opposition, to people who don't actually believe in those things. Much in the same way that claims of necessity for free speech has been a rallying cry for the far right, people who do not give about free speech, we have to recognize that the only way to meaningfully preserve the value of that. Okay, I think we got it. 2 minutes and 20 seconds of silence on your end feels a bit unfair. Yeah, I'd say this. I'd say this accurately describes my take. More or less.
Okay, that sounds good. Free speech is only valuable socially if it is meaningful and if it helps us arrive at moral and truthful positions. That's the part that I disagree with. My own position is that free speech does apply to immoral and untruthful speech as well, and it is right to protect people's right to spread misinformation.
Yeah, so there are degrees to this. It's really about the rules that you set and the effects that they have. So, for example, if you had freedom of speech with absolutely no limitations, that could potentially include stuff like harassment, death threats, doxing people. And for that reason, we do have some limits, though even that is a concession against free speech extremism. The issue that I have is that much like, say, for example, a free market, free speech is a tool which is more powerful when used by some over others. And it's easy to imagine, because it's what's happening today, a situation in which free speech is used to suppress or to have a chilling effect on the free speech of others, that there's a kind of mutual exclusivity there. And if that's the case, I feel like you're not getting anything meaningful from the institution.
Okay. I would want to unpack just a few terms here. Because in the clip and earlier in the stream, you referred to me specifically as a free speech extremist, and that's a word you used in that clip as well. I feel like that's like vague. Like extreme just means like, oh, your position is it's just a relative term. I can't help but feel that like the term you mean is a free speech absolutist, someone who would not agree with any restriction on speech at all, even like death threats. Would that be fair?
Yeah, sure. I use those terms pretty interchangeably. I mean, I'd say that's a pretty extreme position, right? Most people who enjoy free speech recognize like death threats shouldn't be legal, calls to violence, saying fire in a crowded
Yeah.
theater, crap like that, right?
It's certainly not my position that we shouldn't have any restrictions. I agree with basic restrictions like death threats, slander, libel, doxing. The usual bag of tricks. I go along. That's why I mean sometimes people have applied the term free speech absolutist to me because I am vocally against hate speech laws, Holocaust denial laws, and specifically, which you mentioned in your clip, I'm opposed to deplatforming or shutting down people for misinformation. I don't think that big tech censorship is a good solution to misinformation. I think it's morally wrong, and I also think it's pragmatically wrong.
What do you mean by big tech censorship?
I mean like Facebook decide like I don't know if Brett Weinstein has been deplatformed from anywhere for spreading vaccination disinformation, but I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think he should be. I would say that Facebook should not remove Brett Weinstein and I agree, spreading vaccine disinformation, which I don't dispute is harmful. I actually agree it is harmful. I don't think that that deplatforming him is a moral or a practical solution.
What's immoral about a social media company deciding they don't want to have their bandwidth hosting content they feel is socially destructive?
Well, I think that what we should strive for as a society is to have a forum for open and free discourse. It gets a little complicated when we talk about Facebook because I'm a little heterodox among free speech guys on this in that I don't actually think it's a problem for any particular platform like Facebook to have whatever moderation rules. I think the problem with Facebook is that it is a monopoly. It controls too much of the share of news information, and that's what I think is harmful about Facebook. So where I think the harm is in one private company like Facebook controlling whatever their share of news information is and dictating to us what the terms are. I don't think they or anyone should have the right to do that. I think it should belong to the people.
So that I agree with. The issue I have is that by its nature, social media is very susceptible to monopoly and to being made a conglomerate. Social media sites operate best when the greatest number of people are using them. It means it's more likely your friends, coworkers, family use them. or that they have the largest volume of content through which to sift, which is why you have these, consolidations. There are only like, what, half a dozen relevant large social media companies that people really know about and use. It's probably more than that, but there aren't very, very many. I don't know if that's something that can be fixed. Even if you broke all these companies up, that would just mean you'd have to create 12 more accounts to manage all your different interests. It seems messy. I think that we're talking about private markets here, and that's destructive. But let's get rid of the private company issue. Let's say that all this was nationalized by the government. I still think the government would have a right to enforce terms of service limitations on behavior on their platform. I mean, after all, if you go in a government building, you may have a First Amendment right to say whatever you like, but they can still kick you out if you're unruly. It seems reasonable to me that those privileges could extend to any online discourse.
You early in that answer, you said you agreed with me. I guess I got lost. What part specifically did you agree with?
I don't like big tech companies monopolizing discourse, but I don't think that really has anything to do with the nature of terms of service requirements or TOS or,
Well, it's not.
censorship.
It's not so much. It's not so much that they're monopolizing discourse. It's that they control the switch to what speech is allowable, and that's what I don't agree with. And agreeing with me on that seems to run counter to what you said in that video clip. You specifically said if people use their right to free speech to spread disinformation, which leads to harm, then that would be an element of our free speech that we must excise. So I don't see how you can reconcile that statement with agreeing with me right then.
Because what matters is the rules that you set. So some rules that you set are going to be destructive, even if they're targeted specifically at things that are immediately bad. So I'm okay, for example, with TOS cracking down on the vaccine misinformation, COVID misinformation stuff, because that's literally killing millions of people. I don't really care if it's done by corporations or if it's done by some government-controlled social media site. It doesn't really make a difference to me. I'm okay with it being cracked down on. I guess I just don't have much faith
Is
in
it
free
literally killing
speech.
millions, though? Is it literally killing them
I'd say
in
it's
the
literally
normative
killing
sense of
them.
that word?
Yeah, I'd say so.
That is, I think, where the crux of this is, because the argument you're essentially using is that, like, we don't have the right to harm others, right? We would all agree with that, right? So if I can say that your action causes harm to others in some way, then it therefore follows that I'm justified in restricting you. And that sounds good. Most people will be like, yep.
Well,
But I think
hold
where
on.
it breaks.
To be
Yep.
clearer,
Yes, go on.
we're talking about legal
Uh-huh.
restrictions. Doing something which causes others harm is not sufficient for involuntary manslaughter. But if you're making YouTube videos advising children on the best method to kill themselves, that would also get taken down by YouTube. In that case, you're not literally killing children, but you are spreading information which is determined to not be valuable to public discourse and is also harmful and causes meaningful harm. And you're going to kill far more people with vaccine misinfo than you will with suicide instructions anyway. That's
But you just said that the suicide instructions weren't literally killing anyone. So does that apply to vaccine misinformation as well? Would it be fair to say they're not literally killing people?
I mean, if by literally killing you mean like the video's not reaching out of the screen and stabbing them to death, then of course not. But they are causing the death directly. The information directly causes people
They're
to die.
causing death directly is the same thing. You're saying they're literally killing them, and that's where I think this breaks down, because it seems true. You don't have the right to harm people, so we as a society are justified in restricting your rights if you're using them to harm people. But the thing is, I think the criteria for harm for harm that we restrict legally is actually higher than that. I think that this is actually
But we're not
this very
talking
low
legally.
criteria.
We're only talking
It,
terms
it,
of
it
service, right?
um
I'm not talking about
well,
arresting anyone for vaccine misinfo. That's a First Amendment issue. I'm just talking about getting kicked off social media.
okay, but what caused me to respond this way is for you phrased it in a way that was essentially criminal. Like, you are doing something that directly results in the death of others. Typically, if someone were to do something like that, we would say that is a legal matter. You're framing there. You might not have intended it, but your framing there was legal.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's like
So
you
so
can
so so
say
you
like,
you believe in wait, so you believe it's legal for someone to directly cause the harm of another person? You think
yeah,
that
it
should
can,
be legal?
it can be, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
the for legality, it's not enough for your actions to merely lead to the death of another person. There's a degree of culpability, mens rea has to be determined. Now, what we're
Okay.
really talking about here is stochastic harm, which is usually not restricted by the government. Directly encouraging another person to commit a crime is a crime, but sort of talking about doing a thing, taking an action, and then other people committing crimes because of it. That's stochastic terrorism. That's not illegal. Now, vaccine misinfo isn't illegal, and not taking the vaccine isn't illegal. So we're not even talking about stochastic terrorism here. What we're really talking about is encouraging bad behavior. I think the closest analogy you could arrive at through this would be some of these YouTube DIY videos that can hurt you if you try them yourself. You know, those are pretty common. You'll watch like a 5 minute crafts or whatever, and it'll be like, you know, do this cute little trick to make like a little cake inside of a milk carton. But if you actually did it in real life, because they cheat in their videos, the microwave would explode. And maybe if somebody got hurt doing that, they would sue. In fact, that has happened. There was a woman who did some kind of trick with water. It created a bomb basically when done improperly, and a girl died in Japan, and she ended up suing the YouTuber who made that video to begin with. And that's Japanese law, not American law. I think they have different laws over there. But YouTube would be within its right to take down the original video if they felt like it had the potential to encourage people to do harm. So by that metric, that's what I'm talking about there, you know? No, the family of the
Okay.
dead girl
So
sued, chat, not the dead girl. Sorry, they thought the ghost sued. The ghost didn't sue.
they got you, man. They're keeping you on your toes. Yeah. So I think we there's something you said there that I think is important that we agree on, which is merely establishing that something harms someone in some way is not enough to justify banning it. There has to be a more there has to be something else. Like I think that a key component is that there has to be a directness from the person's actions to a tangible, measurable act of harm to someone else. So,
We could
like
ban
for
people for
instance,
whatever, right? I
me.
mean,
Well, okay. The legally you can ban people for whatever. That is a right you have. However, I would say that when we're talking about, for instance, YouTube, which I mean, or its parent company, Alphabet, Google, um, uh, what they control is much larger than any they have a monopoly on video content, which is like a huge amount of traffic on the internet. I think that if we're going to talk about entity like them banning and deciding what content is allowable, the law might be on their side, but I don't agree it should be. And I would say morally and in every normal way we mean it, that is not a right that they should hold. It is not reasonable for one company to hold the control over internet discourse that Alphabet currently holds. That's not a reasonable position, I don't think.
would your
I think it's
position on this
anti-democracy.
change if it was a democratically controlled state-run institution?
I don't know about state run, but I tend to favor systems that are decentralized and democratically controlled. Yes. So if it was democratically controlled, I would have a different opinion
I
about it.
won't disagree with you on that. Okay. I think that this is just a situation where any social media website, whether it's tiny or large, it has a right to have a terms of service for a variety of reasons. Its size is an issue. I respect that and I agree with that. I don't want a corporation having this much control over discourse, but I think the terms of service is kind of tangential. You know what I mean? It would be like how do I say it? Like if we lived in Ancapistan and there was some gigantic corporation, you know, and they owned a bunch of land and businesses and crap, and it was, you know, if you broke a rule, they could like send state cop troopers to arrest you or whatever. And I would take issue with that and all, but I don't necessarily have the issue with the concept of laws. So for me, the thing to target there would be the Ancapistan private corporation authoritarian dictatorship, not so much the idea of getting rid of all law or rule in that area. We need TOS, don't we? I mean, these sites couldn't really function otherwise.
Uh, there is a story that very much influenced my opinion about TOS on these big sites. A few years ago, I want to say it was around 2015, Facebook rolled out this big change to their algorithm that was going to prioritize video content, and all across content creators on the website, there was this big pivot to video. You probably remember this. It was a pretty big deal. The pivot to video. Everyone was talking about it.
Yes.
Um, I don't know if you remember it. Yeah.
Well, I
So
remember
it,
the shift, the transition. Yeah.
and it was incredibly expensive to do that, and a lot of these platforms and sites and news sites went out of business pivoting to video. And then after the pivot to video came, Facebook changed their algorithm back. So basically, what they did was they just culled the market. They basically burnt down everything that couldn't compete with an algorithm change like that. And at the time, Facebook was a gigantic share of news traffic. I think it was something in the neighborhood of 80%. I don't know. I would guess it's gone down since then, but I'm not sure. But at that time, it was gigantic. It's not, so that's a terms of service, right? They're within their rights to decide what content they want to prioritize. But the problem is when the person deciding that, when the person with the finger on that switch controls that amount of information, that amount of traffic, that amount of news, then that is not democratic. That's dangerous. It doesn't matter what their terms of service are at that point. So I don't entirely agree about big platforms needing terms of service. I actually think it's a major problem
That's not
to
really
democracy and to speech.
that's not really a terms of service thing. That's just the way in which
It's not
corporations
exactly terms of service, but it's them making a decision about content on their platform. And surely, if they have the right, like, you wouldn't object to a smaller website doing that. You'd be like, well, if they want to prioritize video, they can prioritize video. And I would ordinarily say there's no problem with that. What do I care if some website wants to prioritize video? But the problem is, it's not some website. It's 80% of news traffic in the United States at that time.
Well, the issue here is that what you're basically just talking about power. I mean, you're talking about centralized power of any form, whether you're talking about states or
I think
corporations.
speech is always about power, actually.
Well, any institution is going to have the ability to use its power to maneuver things in a way that benefits itself. But I think this is, again, totally tangential to TOS. In fact, I think what you're doing right now is you're biting the conservative misdirection, because everyone knows almost intuitively that it's fucked up how much control corporations have, but conservatives have masterfully misdirected that conversation to being about website TOS. In reality, website TOS is an infinitesimally small fragment of the total power corporations represent, not to even mention nation states, But now conservatives get to act like anarchists talking about, breaking up big tech or whatever, and they don't really care about that, of course. TOS isn't the issue here. You're just talking about power. And if you want to deal with that power by, breaking up these corporations or nationalizing them or imposing limitations on what they
Which I
can and
do.
can't do. Right, and that's great, But I think
Yeah.
terms of service are just necessary. They're necessary for everyone, regardless of the size of the social media company. Even with the biggest social media companies, first of all, it's necessary for their business because, as we can see with all these conservative off-brand sites, any website that has a terms of service agreement that allows for all sorts of shenaniganry, these sites turn into hellholes. Moderation, or at least the collective expectation of moderation, is a component of most decent social media sites. The only people who think otherwise are people who are still using 4chan at 32 years old, and we don't want them to be a good model for society. And moving past that, like talking more broadly, whether you're a large company or a small company, if they're only allowed to remove things that are strictly illegal, which they'd have to, of course, people posting child pornography.
That's not my position, though.
No, well,
My position
I'm not
is
saying
that
you
is that
want
is
that.
that companies. Okay, but just to clarify, my position is that companies of a certain size, the size of Google or Facebook, exercising even innocuous terms of service, it actually is not innocuous. It's not benign. It actually has a very corrosive effect on
What should they be able to ban
our
people for?
democracy.
Like what should Twitter, for example, be able to ban people for?
What I'm talking about actually, in my opinion, doesn't really apply to Twitter. I don't think Twitter is a company comparable in power or media share to or market share to Google or Facebook. But the answer to what should Facebook be allowed to ban is that Facebook should be broken up, because whatever rule that Facebook exerts on the market with an 80% market share is tyrannical. There is no rule that Facebook could make about modifying its about moderating its platform that wouldn't be tyrannical.
Well, that's what I mean. It's not really TOS then, right? That'd be like me talking about like a potentially good law I could implement. Somebody saying like, "Well, I don't want America to implement any law. America's a tyrannical nation, needs to be broken up." And I'm like, "Well, do you think the law's okay?" And they're like, "Well, I don't care about the law. I don't think America should be doing it." Well, yeah, sure. If your position is that these companies should be broken up or nationalized, democratized, whatever, fine. But all them smaller Facebooks are going to have TOS. They're going to need TOS. So in the meantime, I don't see a TOS as being an issue. And I don't think a TOS free Facebook now would necessarily be better or any less autocratic, because we're not talking about TOS primarily. The main way they get you is through their algorithms and their site design. They don't need to ban people to control people, you know, just choosing what types of content you show up. And those are proprietary. They don't disclose their algorithms. So you'll never know what they're using. They're legally incentivized to keep them quiet. That's the way they actually manufacture discourse. The TOS is just the obvious, overt crap that they can, you know, like really evident stuff they can crack down on. So I don't know if there's a way to meaningfully challenge this power through the TOS argument outside of the broader thing, which is, you know, breaking them up, nationalizing them, whatever you want to do.
Okay, I think that we I guess agree that the size and power exerted by Facebook and Google is undemocratic and not good for our society, and that they should be regulated and broken up. It sounds like we don't really have any disagreement about that.
You know,
Would
no
that be
fan of
fair? I don't. I'm
corporations.
not sure if I. Yeah, I'm not sure if I brought up TOS or if you did, or how we got onto. It wasn't my intention to come on here and debate big tech TOS. I actually wanted to make a case for the value of allowing misinformation on the internet, and why it is an ultimate good, not debate Facebook's terms of service,
Oh no, that's
which is
fine.
a topic I'm interested in as well. But if I wanted to get
Well,
back
if
to
we're talking
your
about
original.
whether or not misinfo is allowed online, that is TOS, isn't it? I mean, whether or not this stuff stays on YouTube or Facebook is going to be a matter of those websites' TOS. I just think as long as they have TOS, banning vaccine misinfo seems like, well, there's a
Okay.
reasonable argument at
Let
least.
me try to decouple my argument from TOS.
Mhm.
I think that there is a greater good being served by allowing misinformation to be propagated through the internet. On the subject of whether or not websites, private websites, have the right to moderate this through TOS, I would say that uh, what I'm against is giant oligopolies, not private companies enforcing TOS. So I mean, to me, that's I kind of go off on a tangent there. You know, I'm like, well, I'm not against companies, platforms having a TOS. I'm against monopolies, and I think that monopolies uh, trying to control the propagation of information is a problem. If they weren't monopolies, I would have my opinion would be different. I would have different considerations. But what I was hoping to make was an argument for the innate value of misinformation being spread on the internet.
Sure. What is the innate value of misinformation being spread on the internet?
Okay. Before I get into that, I had a question about your original uh, comment in that video clip, because you said free speech is only valuable socially if it is meaningful and if it helps us arrive at moral and truthful positions. What do you mean by meaningful there? Because I would say that speech is necessarily meaningful. If it's not meaningful, it's noise.
No, I don't think that. Well, I think a lot of speech is noise. I think that's a lot of punditry these days, where speech is just sort of the catch-all term that we have to describe what people do when they open their mouths and exhale air. But in terms of meaningful speech, like it goes beyond that. There are plenty of people who will use free speech to deliberately spread misinformation to serve the interests and power of people who are worth millions of times what you and I are, right? That to me, I mean, it's
Mm.
meaningful in the sense that if they wanted to, you could use free speech in a way to construct a very autocratic society through manufacturing consent. Imagine, for example, a dystopian world in which all the pundits, all the media figures are actually on the bankrolls of a handful of very powerful media moguls that work in tandem with incredibly influential industries to spread misinformation, which lead people to willingly vote in favor of companies and politicians and what have you that are against their interests. You could theoretically, without ever violating freedom of speech, conduct kind of an autocracy where people are just blindly led from point to point. Hard as it may be to imagine, I think that free speech has to be meaningful. It's not valuable in and of itself. Nothing is. It has to serve a good interest. It has to lead to a good outcome. And unfortunately, the biggest champions of free speech, not talking about you, but the biggest so-called champions of free
No, I
speech,
am the biggest champion of free speech.
well, are the people who believe in it the least, the conservatives, who,
Uh-huh.
and they know this, they don't give a fuck about free speech, but they scream
I
free
agree with you
speech.
about this, by the way.
Yeah, because they don't have good points. So the best way for them to substitute in affirmative arguments for their position is merely to argue that they have the right to have their shitty positions and pretend everyone else thinks they don't. So free speech should be meaningful. It has to lead to good outcomes. It doesn't work well.
I still
in
don't know what you
autocracies.
mean by meaningful. I guess so. When you say meaningful, are you using that term in such a way that it excludes, for instance, a certain Tucker Carlson speech that you may have just watched? Would that not fall under the umbrella of meaningful speech?
Well, I suppose it was meaningful in the sense that it was culturally relevant. I'm not talking about a law prohibiting like certain people or certain political ideologies from talking. I'm just saying philosophically you have to make a justification for the right to free speech. And I think that you can make that justification in ways that excise certain types of speech, which you believe as well, which is why you said libel and slander are things that the government should be able to crack down on you for. To put it another way, okay? Um, I feel like in Nazi Germany, if there was freedom of speech, and there wasn't, but if there was, an implementation of hate speech laws would increase the utility of freedom of speech in that country, not decrease it. A restriction on what people could say would actually lead to a more free expression of thought than it would have been without the
Can't
restriction.
imagine a worse analogy than anti-hate speech laws being
Modern hate
enforced in
speech. Sorry,
Nazi Germany.
modern hate speech laws, like the idea that
But
you would prevent
obviously
people from this,
the
that, or the
Nazi
other.
government would not do a good job implementing anti-hate speech laws. Obviously, that would only compound the problem.
Yeah, of course. I meant like our hate speech laws. Yeah.
Right, but even first of all, we don't have any hate speech laws. So, but assuming you mean like European style hate speech laws, but even if you had like, I don't agree there's such a thing as good hate speech laws, but even if you had like well-meaning, like don't be racist against black people, don't use anti-gay slurs, all things that I agree are good. The Nazis shouldn't be enacting though. The Nazis are not going to carry out those out appropriately. They're going to be twisted and warped
They would
in
just
some way.
change the law, right? They didn't care about the law. I don't think that
Okay.
I don't even support hate speech laws in the United States because I don't think that I don't think there's much utility to them when implemented here. I'm only saying that
There's certainly no utility to them implemented in Europe because one of the things Europe has found out is that speech by its nature is actually not very prone to it's a hard thing to regulate. It's not really given to regulation, which is why a lot of them have either laxed or relaxed or like done away with some of their hate speech restrictions.
yeah, I generally
I've actually read about this in Ethiopia, where there's this racial civil war breaking out, and like a year ago, they tried to implement anti-hate speech laws specifically on Facebook, and they did a study on the outcomes, and it wasn't successful because it makes sense I wouldn't expect it to be because I think speech by its nature is just not very given to being regulated. It's very subjective. You can, it's very, we speak in symbols. It's easy to simply change symbols. You can make up a new, you can give up one hate symbol and make up a new one. So I think that
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
typically,
I'm not in favor of
yeah.
hate speech laws here in the States. I'm only saying that there are ways in which limitations to accessible or allowed speech can actually improve the quality of speech. You have to agree with this because you believe in the validity of libel and slander laws. You think that if there are legal consequences to defamatory speech, that improves the quality of speech. What you're doing there technically
So,
is restricting
so well,
speech, but it
let me.
leads to
I
better.
agree. I agree. It is a restriction. I agree. It is a restriction. But specifically, I agree with laws restricting threats and slander if they meet a certain criteria. So, um, for instance, it, if we can draw a direct connection between you calling me a pedophile and me being damaged and being hurt in some way, being ostracized, losing my job, etc. If we can draw a direct line between your action and my harm, then I think it makes sense
Yeah,
to
that's the legal standard. You
to
have to
to
indicate
yeah,
damages, and you have to indicate
right.
false information leading to damages, and you can pursue that
in,
however you
in,
like.
in the clip, you advocated something far more broad. You said that we must that if people use their right to free speech to spread disinformation, which leads to harm, then that would be an element of our free speech which we must excise. That is a far broader standard.
Yeah, but it's not a legal standard. I'm talking about aspirations, goals.
Okay.
We should always work to fight
Okay.
against misinformation, I don't think that's I don't even think that's a controversial take, really. You should work to
I,
excise elements of free speech that are misinformation. I mean, yeah, sure, fine, right. But I'm not saying you can't do that necessarily through a law, except for, I guess, libel and slander
okay.
laws, which we already have. You'd have to sort of take a broader approach. And whether that's social media companies have TOS against this, that, or the other, or maybe laws against stochastic terrorism, which we don't really have in the United
Yeah,
States.
that's a term that makes me really, really uncomfortable, specifically because it kind of is a go around that direct line of harm where a specific action resulted in a specific harm to a specific individual. Whereas stochastic just means statistical. So, if I say something or if you say something on the internet to your audience of 300,000 people, something like uh, uh, you know, the billionaires
Something
are
feisty?
working actively to harm you, your family, and your community, something that you and I probably both agree is true. And if you say it to 300,000 people, if one of those people says, hey, you know what, he's right, I have to go kill a billionaire, well, then you just technically did a stochastic terrorism. I think that stochastic terrorism is a term that should make the left kind of uncomfortable.
Well, it would really depend on whatever legal standard was set for it. Now, obviously, if the legal threshold was set so low that anyone expressing any antagonism at any time leading to any kind of harm could be held legally culpable, then that would be a pretty bad law. I wonder if there would be a better way of handling stuff like this. So, for example, maybe legal consequences for some of the stuff Boebert has said, like kind of implying or suggesting that, you know, Ilhan Omar
That
has
Ilhan
like a
Omar's a
bomb backpack.
terrorist.
Right, right, stuff like that. There are, legal solutions aren't really the most graceful when we're talking about stuff like this, but we have to recognize that the world has changed substantially over the past few decades, and a lot of the harm that we
Let me ask
see,
you something,
well, I
Vaush.
just want to say, a lot of the harm we
Okay.
see socially isn't done in ways that are accounted for legally right now. I mean, far more people died because of COVID misinformation in 2020 than people who died to murders by a massive amount. But murderers get put in jail, and COVID misinformation peddlers sleep in mansions. So the law is not aligning perfectly with, retribution or punishment or rehabilitation for those doing the most harm. Maybe that's something to be looked at. Maybe speech laws invented before the internet aren't perfectly applicable in a world where a random person can have their words heard by millions overnight. Maybe there are changes that can be made. I
Well,
don't
that
know
was
the
true
answer to
before the
these.
internet, though. I mean,
Not
Lauren Boebert didn't say anything on the internet. She said something on the floor of Congress.
Yeah, because of modern video distribution networks. I mean,
Sure, but we had mass communication before the internet. You know,
Yeah,
we
but
had
she was a
TV and even
politician.
radio.
I said random person. I mean, she's a politician. You could get on TV as a
Okay,
politician, but now it could be like anyone, right? And even then, a
so
lot of our speech laws were written before television was super common. So I'm only saying this isn't
I
about.
think our first speech law was written before television was invented, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm a big fan of the First Amendment. I just think it's worth taking a look at. I'm not an absolutist about any kind of law. It's always worth examining these things.
So let me ask you this: how would we pass a law against Lauren Boebert calling Ilhan Omar a terrorist without also making illegal AOC comparing ICE to German concentration camps? Those
Um,
seem to me to be pretty close.
I don't think so, because the ICE facilities were by definition concentration camps, and Ilhan Omar is not a
So the difference
terrorist.
is that you
So
agree with one. So the difference is that you agree with
the
one, you
difference
disagree
is
with
that
the
one of them
other.
is true and one of them is false. I mean, it's not just a
Right.
personal preference. There's a objective differentiation. Comparisons are different than outright statements too. I mean, you can compare anything to anything, but it would be about, in this case, I don't think that's necessarily something that can be targeted with a law. I think the January 6th collaboration stuff would be something more worth looking at, or maybe a stricter set of laws for politicians. I've thought about that before. Sedition is a law we already have, but it's almost never ever brought up in charges, even though a lot of what happened in January 6th was sedition. Definitionally, collaborating with people when they knew they were planning to storm the Capitol. By definition, sedition. It's basically written there like flat out. And maybe invoking stuff like that a little bit more often. The goal would be targeting things that are almost always bad, regardless of context. So disinformation and calls to overthrow democracy, stuff like that, are like categorically bad. um, it would be something worth talking about, examining at least legally.
So
Uh,
I don't agree about disinformation. I actually think that that just speech, that a just standard for speech, not just laws, but like morally, like you're talking about, what we should as people protect. I think that we actually should protect misinformation. You said disinformation, I said misinformation,
except
but
for libel
I think it redounds to the same thing.
and slander.
Uh, Yeah, yeah. But only libel and slander where we can draw a direct line from your actions to my harm. So it's not just any old like I don't think we should we should I think we should protect some things that like if you just called me an asshole right now or something, I think that should be protected. Or if you said that I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. If you said that my tweet was tantamount to enabling pedophilia, I think that's a pretty outrageous thing to say. But I don't think that it would cross the line to something that shouldn't be protected both by the First Amendment and also just our ideal of free speech. I think that doesn't rise to that occasion.
What about the
I think only,
civil
only
suits?
specific acts of
What about the civil suits that were made against Alex
man.
Jones by the families of the Sandy Hook shooting victims?
Oh, I think I support those suits, and I think that they were able to meet the threshold that I described. I think that they were able to draw a direct line between defamatory statements he made and direct harm to the family. So I support those.
Okay. Well, what about people who spread vaccine misinformation and people who die of COVID when they didn't take the vaccine? And those people are evidently fans of and consumers of the people who are spreading the vaccine misinformation.
Right, right. So one difference there is that the families that Jones victimized, they were victimized because he was telling like an even more clear cut example in my opinion is Comet Ping Pong, the Pizzagate place. Alex Jones told his followers that there was a pedophile ring being run in the basement of this institution, and one of his followers did in fact go there with a gun to investigate. Right, so by saying this, by spreading this lie about Comet Ping Pong, they became victimized by an audience of people who believed it. The standard with vaccine disinfo is a little different. People are it's not like as a result, like how would this analogy go? I mean, what I'm trying to say is that they're hearing Brett Weinstein tell or Joe Rogan tell them that that vaccines are bad, and then they're making a decision about their health, a very poorly informed decision, a very tragic one. But I don't think we can point to victimization in the exact same way, because it's not like there's a maniac just spreading lies about you personally, because that's what Jones was doing. He was spreading. He wasn't saying like, oh, I mean, this would be bad too, but it would just be different. Oh, the Jews are bad. Okay, it's one thing to say the Jews are bad, but it's another thing to say Vaush, that guy on YouTube, that guy's running a pedophile ring. These are different statements in a qualitative way.
Well, I agree. The statements made by Alex Jones were found, well, they weren't found defamatory because the case got thrown out because he never showed up with the documents. So, but they were charged with, for the for damages brought about from his speech. What we're talking about here is different. I acknowledge that. I still think it's really harmful, though. So we have something a little bit like this.
I agree, it's harmful. I just think that we're obligated to recognize it under the umbrella of free speech, both legally and socially.
Well, so was slander and libel until we decided they weren't. We shouldn't fall into like a sort of inertial defense of the past. Libel and slander laws.
We're going in circles here because I did address the difference between a libel and slander.
Well, no, but so okay, I know there are differences, but I don't think those differences are meaningful.
Brett Weinstein's Brett Weinstein is not telling people to attack a specific person.
I'm not talking
I would argue
about
Jones did.
I'm not talking about Brett Weinstein specifically. And with regards to the Alex Jones stuff, not all the charges brought were about specifically attacking individual family members or whatever. A lot of the charges brought against him pertained to the general speech he was engaging in and the actions that it led to from his followers. But if we're to talk about disinformation, what about people who lie in advertising or have products which are faulty or harmful to people? So if you, for example, peddle a product which is potentially harmful to people, that is something that you can go to jail for, depending on your level of legal culpability. We acknowledge that, even if you're not directly targeting a person, it is possible to, through manifest misinformation, lead to harm in a way that could get you hurt. Now, there is a technical difference here.
This is a really different scenario.
In one case,
I know you said you were talking about Brett Weinstein.
Well, in one case, you bring up Brett Weinstein, not me. I don't watch Brett Weinstein's content. You talk about him. I don't talk about him. I'm saying that in one case, you sell a thing which leads to others being harmed, and you lie about it. In the other case, you lie about a thing which leads to others being harmed, but you're not selling a product. You're simply making money through their consumption of your videos. In both cases, really, we're selling something. I'm selling something right now, which is my content. I'm making money from it as we speak. So when people like, Alex Jones or Joe Rogan or whatever, well, they do sell their products, sure, but they're advertising their political messaging. That is in and of itself a product as well, not a literal thing that you buy and consume, but something that is nonetheless a commercial exchange between the viewer and the person producing it. Now, that being said, there are people who have made money causing thousands of deaths through falsely or falsifiable vaccine information. Now, that isn't exactly like any existing law. Well, there are a lot of people who do this. I don't think
there are a lot, but Brett Weinstein would be one of them.
I don't think it's unreasonable for at the very least civil suits to be brought against these people. I mean, God, they've been lying knowingly for years now.
Okay. So what I was going to ask, I was going to ask you outright if your standard of speech that's wait, I gotta find it. Speech that spreads harm or is immoral should be excised if that does apply to COVID vaccine disinformation. And it sounds like you're saying it does.
Well, okay. Well, yeah. If you can do it in a way, I'm not saying like have 1984 laws that ban any mention of the stuff. It's about how you do it. Should be opposed. It's however you can. If civil suits being brought against people who lie about the vaccines, who lie about COVID, if that's an effective way of curtailing, and by the way, it seems to be, because
Well, you're drawing a
suits from
distinction that I'm a little
Dominion
fuzzy on.
suits from Dominion did get Fox News, OAN, Sidney Powell, and Newsmax to all retract previous comments they had made about the company. So clearly, showing people there are consequences for lying is an effective way to get them to stop lying. Maybe libel and slander are just two categories of a broader
Right.
legal framework against misinformation that we
But
should consider the expansion of.
but those statements made against Dominion were specifically defamatory statements against the company that essentially accused them of a crime. It said that they meddled in a presidential election,
Which was
and then
misinformation, no?
which they did not have evidence to, which they didn't, right. But what I'm saying is it's a specific accusation against a company of criminal activity.
Yeah, I'm talking
or
about
very close to it
a
at the very
related
least.
but not
Yeah.
identical type of misinformation that I think is worthy of some
I think
kind
it's
of
I think
opposition.
I think it's pretty different than the example of vaccine misinformation. You've characterized it as lies, and I just want to interrogate that a little bit, because it's not obvious to me that that the anti-vaccine people actually are lying. I think at least some of them are very sincere in what they believe about vaccines and COVID. Would that, if you believe they were sincere, would that change your opinion on this?
Well, it would definitely change their culpability in any legal standard that cared about how honest they thought they were being. A lot of what they do now is hidden behind, dog whistles and plausible deniability because they don't want to get yeeted off of YouTube. That's what Jimmy Dore does, right? He'll never say, well, I mean, he lies quite often, but, he generally tries not to directly lie about COVID or vaccine related stuff. He'll lie by omission, sharing bits of information out of context to paint an overall narrative identical to that of an anti-vaxxer, but less likely to get demonetized or thrown off YouTube. So there's always going to be some trickery when it comes to stuff like that. But again, if people want to throw out their, civil suits because of behavior like this, I think there's a good legal argument for that. It's not like people are throwing libel or slander suits against everyone who they think has ever lied about them. I don't think we need to do the whole slippery slope thing. The idea that the addition of a new legal consideration would mean that everyone is getting, deplatformed all the time.
The reason why I want to come on and defend the rights of anti-vaxxers and COVID conspiracy theorists, people who I despise and agree that they are actually causing harm. But the reason why I think it's important that we protect that their right to do it, even if it is wrong, even if it's not moral, even if it's not truthful, is because I think that, and it sounds corny, but I think that free inquiry, democratic discourse, whatever, it's corny. I think that's how we determine what's true, and I think that it's the best we have at determining what's true. And I think without open discourse, without free inquiry, I think what we're left with is some sort of priest class dictating to us what's true. And to me, it's very obvious. I hope I don't have to prove it, but to me, it's very obvious that the threat of that method of truth determining, the priest class telling us what's true, and there is no one to question it, is in the long run far more harmful, far more destructive, far more corrosive to democracy than what I agree are the very real threats of allowing open inquiry, immoral, untruthful, harmful positions and all.
The issue is we already have a priest class. It's capital. What you're saying right now would be valid if we lived in a fair, equal, democratic society, but we don't. Right now, we have political positions that are taken as issues worthy of debate simply because billionaires thought it worthy of instilling in the population a need to debate. Climate change is not debated world round. It's debated
We might
in
need
some
to
countries.
unpack what you mean.
The
We might need to
majority,
unpack what you mean by capitalism is the priest
the
class. I think I
countries,
agree, but I'm not sure.
the countries with the most fervent discourse about whether or not climate change exists are countries in which there are Murdoch-run media companies. Our discourse on climate change, COVID vaccines, a ton of other stuff is only had because we don't really have freedom of speech. What we have is, like everything else in this country, a system where people with more wealth have more power, and those people have a financial interest in investing in certain subjects to the extent that they become means for discourse. Which
Okay.
is why, before talking to you, I had to spend an hour and 40 minutes watching a TPUSA conference that opened with 5 minutes
I
of a
was
person
wondering why you
talking
did that.
about
I'm still
how
not
they
sure I understand.
care about the American people, and then an hour 35 minutes talking about wokeness, CRT, Lincoln statues, and pregnancy flight suits. The COVID shit, the only reason this is debated here, the literal only reason, and it's similar in other countries, but particularly bad here. The only reason this is debated is because the way in which COVID manufactured itself, the way in which it was produced, was one in which Trump could not handle politically without making an adversary of the virus. And in doing so, he made it a political issue. Therefore, his mishandling of COVID led to Democrats' role as the group to pick up the mess, so to speak, and therefore it has to be politicized in a way to demonize any proposed solutions Democrats offer. That's why Trump supported the vaccines back when he was the one who greenlit them with Operation Warp Speed. So now Democrats are the ones considered to be the gatekeepers of the vaccine. So Republicans pretend to care about the vaccine rights issue by making a political issue out of something that they would be on the other side of if they had been the ones in power during their implementation. That's it. There's no free speech here. And there are people like Joe Rogan and Brett Weinstein who are either stupid enough to believe it or smart enough to make money off the millions of Americans roped into discourse that was manufactured from the top down by billionaires telling millionaire pundits how to carefully deliver misinformation in such a way as to avoid legal liability while nonetheless misinforming the public. There is no free speech debate here. Free speech on its own is as meaningful as lawlessness in a society
Hello?
where some people have guns and the other are naked and unarmed. There's nothing here that's worth defending.
That was a pretty good rant, man.
Yeah.
While you were talking, I had time to think about what you meant
Thank you.
by capitalism being a priest class. And I mean, yeah, I agree. People like Murdoch, and this is kind of my original point. Zuckerberg, Facebook, or whatever they're called now, Alphabet. Yeah, I might quibble on whether or not they actually act as a priest class, but they act as gatekeepers to what is allowable discourse. And that's why I don't trust any of these people to be guardians of misinformation. And it's why my prescription for this problem of our overlords, the ruling class, dictating to us what speech, what is in the confines of allowable speech, is decentralization and democratization. Not putting our faith in tech platforms to protect us, quote unquote. You can't see me doing sarcastic hand quotes, but I am, to protect us from misinformation, which I agree is harmful. But I also think has a role to play in any free and open society.
Well, the role
The
that
right
it
to be
plays
wrong
is
is the right to think.
destructive.
Not necessarily. The right to be wrong gives us permission to think, right? Because
It's not about
to think about it for ourselves and figure out where we land on something, we have to try new things. We have to risk failure. We have to risk humiliation. We might just get it wrong.
It's not.
And
It's not
invariably
about.
some of us are, and we need to have that freedom to
It's
do
not
it,
about the right
because
to be
that's how
wrong.
we get the guy who gets it right.
It's the right for powerful people to spend millions producing calculated bullshit.
No, I'm saying I oppose that. I'm saying we need to decentralize and democratize.
Okay, well, I agree with that.
And giving
but
more power to
TOS
Google and Facebook isn't doing that.
having them up TOS doesn't give them more power. They already have the power. They
I
could
thought we
ban
got
everyone.
off of TOS a long time ago.
Well, then what are we talking about when we talk about giving them more power? What power am I giving them?
What specifically I'm talking about is the amount of market share that companies like Facebook, or I guess call them Meta,
I'm not
now
talking about
control.
increasing
That's
their.
specifically.
Wait, when you talk about social media companies determine what we can or can't say, talk about us relying on them to protect us, you're talking about TOS. That's the mechanism
Well,
through
okay,
which they would
okay.
determine if
TOS
this
is an
speech is or
example,
not.
but there's another example that you yourself pointed out: the algorithm. The algorithm does that, and it probably does that more effectively than TOS.
I agree, but we can't control that. It's proprietary. They keep that information private.
No, we can't control. There are ways we could. Algorithms can be regulated like anything else can be regulated.
No, they can't.
We don't control them.
They're machine learning. We don't. there's no way to regulate them. The engineers who like create the algorithms behind YouTube and Twitter's, that they don't understand how they work either. It's an unimaginably complicated network that is set to
It
maximize given input values and just runs through trillions of simulations to find, modes of recommendation that optimize that value set. I don't know if there's any way to meaningfully regulate. I don't even know how you could regulate that. You could put
so you're
caps on
very
some stuff.
doomer about you're very doomer about the possibility of regulating algorithms.
It would I don't know if it could be done in a way that disempowers these
But
companies.
of course, of course, of
I don't
course,
know
of
what
course, it
could.
can, because you're correct that no one person at Google knows how the search algorithm works, probably. But that doesn't mean, like, they change and update the algorithm to optimize results, optimize for them all the time. Like all the time, YouTube is changing their algorithm to drive up engagement. If they can do that, they can manipulate it in other ways too. Here's a proposal. Algorithms that drive up engagement, they have to be open. So that anyone can go in and see how that works. That to me would be that to me would be a way to infuse transparency into the system, and would be a democratic regulation.
If you want a law to make algorithms transparent, I'll admit that we're talking about the most, like, I think we're talking about literally the most advanced, like some of the most advanced computer engineering on the planet right now. But so I don't know
But
exactly how they
so
would
what if
parse
it's
this.
advanced?
But
What does that have to do with anything?
because if
It's
it's
weird to me you're arguing against this.
well, because if it's sufficiently advanced, then transparency becomes meaningless. If it's too advanced, then transparency wouldn't be enough. You would also need access to proprietary software or education or key mapping or whatever else on the back end in order to understand it, It would be like we might be asking for transparency for like how there are algorithms that derive their calculations from the movement of like glow lamps or sand rolling at the beach. We might be asking for transparency and just get a photo of the beach. Like we might get the info, but without another set of systems that aren't part of the algorithm, we might not be able to process it.
So okay, so if I don't quite buy any of this, but if I did, here's what I would say. So we should ban machine learning algorithms.
Well, I don't know if it's a matter of buying. I'm pretty sure that's
If
just how
if
it
if
works.
if
But
there if there's wait, what I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I didn't hear what you said.
no, it's not a matter of buying it. I'm just saying that I don't know how transparency would work for something like this. It would be an incredibly complicated. It would go
But
beyond.
my
It's
suggestion was just to ban machine learning algorithms. If we believe this is true,
you
and if there's no way to instill accountability, and they're just unregulated, I would say that they should be banned.
you could argue. I mean,
Yeah,
I
you could.
maybe banning an entire realm of technological development because you're worried about social media companies using them to make bad algorithms seems a bit short-sighted. That seems like kind of a free speech issue. I mean, like, would you have like black shade
I have
feds
no
breaking into
I have
your
no
R&D
problem.
department if you're working on machine learning?
I have no problem using the power of government to hold multinational conglomerates accountable to the people.
But you do have a
I don't
problem
really
with
believe
using the
it
power.
would
Wait,
come
wait,
to
wait.
this.
But you do have an issue with the government holding multinational conglomerates accountable to the people when you're talking about them spreading misinformation that kills millions of people. So you're okay with the government. Wait, wait,
That's
wait, wait, wait,
that's
wait,
not
wait,
what
wait, stop,
happens
stop,
though.
stop,
That's not what
because
happens.
no, no, wait, wait, wait. So you're
I,
you're not okay
I,
with laws being put in place to allow the government to crack down on lethal misinformation spread by agents of gigantic multi-billion corporations, but you are okay with using it to crack down on the cutting edge of AI tech because they might be used in algorithms for social media and you don't like how powerful social media is. You know that if you just banned
all
algorithms, they
of
would
these
still
sites,
be powerful, right?
all of these sites, what they do is they spread user generated content. So it's not Google that's telling people vaccines don't work. It's Brett Weinstein. It's his individual speech, and he's riding the social media wave. He couldn't do it without social media, but there's a distinction there. It's not coming from Google and Facebook and whatever. The algorithm is the proprietary technology of these multinational conglomerates, and so that's entirely different in my opinion.
I
I think
don't
this
think
is
those
just
are
a
different at all.
basic.
I
I
mean,
think this is a
in my
very
case, we're talking about a
basic
death
example.
toll. Like, at least the COVID
I
misinfo
think
stuff's killed lots of people. Even if you got rid of
I didn't
algorithms,
dispute that it was harmful. I said it was the work of individuals on the platform, not the company
well,
itself.
that you could argue
Google
the AI.
doesn't own Brett Weinstein's content.
Well, I don't know what difference that is. You can hold people accountable even if they're not part of gigantic multinational corporations. If Google
Right.
was owned by a single dude with no corporate assets surrounding him and he just contracted labor out, it would still be bad, right? I mean, it's not really the
Yeah, of
power
course.
structure
But
there.
yeah, of course, it's the power structure. This is a very basic example of being kind to people and ruthless to systems. Um, what
People are
I am
systems
much more
past a
comfortable.
certain point.
Oh, come on, dude. That is like that's some like doomer shit right
No,
there. Like,
wait,
oh well, there's no
Joe Biden.
it is an anti-leftist argument to assert that there is no distinction between individuals and
Wait,
systems, because
well,
that
hold
just
on, wait,
means
wait.
now we're treating everyone.
I never said there was no distinction. However, when you have a
You
sufficiently
fustigated the distinction.
when you have a sufficiently powerful individual, they certainly are more locked into the system than a regular person. You know, imagine like it's like 1945, they're busted into Hitler's bunker. Someone wants to shoot them. They're like, hold on, hate systems, not people. Like, well, you know, Hitler was kind of a system in and of himself, wasn't he? Joe Biden is, you know, Brett Weinstein is, and to an extent, I am. I have much more reach than the average person. Past a certain size, you know, we don't become systems, but we are massive wave catchers. We move much more weight than a regular person does. And I think that, you know, you could argue that if a person in that position does a sufficient amount of harm, we have this libel and slander. Maybe it could be expanded. I just don't understand. Even if you got rid of the algorithm stuff, Google, whatever, it would still have a
Mhm.
monopoly on the system. Because you'd be removing it from
You,
all the social media sites. They'd still have a monopoly.
you yourself were the first person to bring up algorithms in this conversation as an example of how these companies are undemocratic and don't serve people.
Yeah, I just don't
I was
know.
piggybacking on your example.
No, fine. Yeah, I just don't know if you could fix that by banning machine learning. I feel like a degree of transparency would be good,
I
depending on
only
how it
said
was
that because
implemented.
you were putting forward an argument that was like, oh well, there's no way to to regulate algorithms because of machine learning. I know a little bit about machine learning. I don't think that it's accurate. Certainly, they can the engineers behind them can optimize them. So I don't buy that's true. I was just going with what you said and saying if I believe that was true, then it seems to me the solution would be to ban machine learning or at least pass regulations about when you could use it.
Well, like I said, transparency would only be meaningful if it was a transparency people could understand, which is difficult. I mean, the
But
average
people
person
can
doesn't
understand
understand
the
shit.
algorithms.
People can't understand.
Well, this isn't about the average person. People can understand the algorithms because people made them and people optimize them all the time.
They didn't make them. The
The,
machines made them. People made the early
oh my
conditions,
god,
the starting uh, um, construction of the system.
Vaush. Alphabet rolls out updates to their search algorithm quarterly. This
Not
isn't like
all
some black box.
not all elements of an algorithm are machine learning. Some elements of algorithms are directly coded and edited by people. Sometimes when it's delegated to machine learning for things that are constantly updating and evolving, like say YouTube's recommendation feed, they can't directly edit elements within that black box. What they can do is change pre-existing conditions and then roll simulations to see if that algorithm is better at achieving set goals than the previous algorithm.
Mhm.
Now, there's a lot of variety here. I'm not a computer engineer. I'm only saying that this is
I
this is
am, by the way.
complicated
That's what I
enough.
do for a living.
Well, then you should know. Then this is complicated enough that
And I do
transparency
know that
would.
it's complicated, but I dispute that it's a black box.
I'm.
People write machine learning algorithms all the time, and they modify them and they optimize them all the time.
I understand that if you're a computer science wizard, it is possible to understand.
I don't have a computer science degree, but
I
I'm mostly
understand
self-taught, and
that if
I don't do very much machine learning stuff.
I understand that if you're educated on this, it may be possible to understand a
Hmm.
good bit of an algorithm. But I guarantee you, and I'd say this with great confidence, that there is not a single person on Earth who could understand everything that goes into the YouTube content recommendation algorithm. That if you could pull apart all the machine learning threads, there is absolutely no way to understand everything in there. Or maybe eventually, but it would take
You're
really
right,
long
Vaush.
time.
I agree with you, but it's just not it's not relevant to my point. We don't need to understand every single line of code in order to see what the algorithm is doing. You know, machine learning algorithms are, you know, amazing, but you know, there's still we can still put things into them and see what comes out, as you yourself pointed out. That's
Yeah,
how we understand
I'm
machine
only
learning
saying
algorithms. We don't go
transparency
through them
wouldn't
line by
be
line. We put things
sufficient.
in, we put things in, we see what comes out, and then we modify them until we like what's coming out. And when Google, you know, updates their search algorithm, that's what they're doing. So it's just not accurate to say that, like, oh, it's impossible. No, it's not impossible.
What's impossible?
They're not a complete under, understanding how the algorithm works is not impossible for us to do. It's
Given
not
enough
impossible to
time,
make it transparent.
given enough time, with enough education, it would be possible to understand a complicated machine learning algorithm, I'm sure. But it would require education that most people don't have access to, and the
It doesn't
algorithm would
matter if
change
most people have.
constantly.
Dude, most people don't read laws in Congress, but there's a reason why we make them public, and some people do read them.
Okay, the point that I'm making is that I don't think introducing transparency to algorithms would mean you've meaningfully addressed the power those algorithms have over people's social media consumption. Like, I can't imagine like they release here's like the source code for Google's algorithms, and it's like, you know, some massive file, and then people would look at it and go, and like Susie from Wisconsin would go like, oh my god, that's why I'm getting so many videos by Jordan Peterson. You know, like I don't know what that would do in terms of meaningfully
Do you think
addressing.
a handful of computer scientists might be able to get their hands on it and go through it and be like, oh, actually, some of this stuff's kind of bad? Do you think that's possible?
People have
And
been
then maybe
talking
they
about
could
how
tell other
harmful
people and they
this.
could write articles.
But we've known about how this stuff is harmful for well over a decade.
Okay.
Nobody gives a fuck. That's already been happening.
Okay.
There have been climate
I
change.
guess it's pointless.
No, I'm advocating for transparency. I'm just saying if your issue is that,
Oh, okay. You're
yeah,
arguing against it.
no, I said that
Okay.
transparency would be good. I'm saying that I don't think it would really change anything. People have been warning about this stuff for ages. Also, by the way, you know, the only outcome from people warning about this would be people wanting to crack down on the rights of individuals and corporations. That's the only real response, right? Do TOS this? You know, corporations can't do this, that, or the other. I don't. I think what you're really looking to do is expand. I don't even know how meaningfully it would do it, but you would be expanding the reach by which people could crack down on this stuff. I don't even know if you got rid of all these algorithms. I mean, I don't even think people would want that. I mean, people will click yes, accept all cookies when they open a web browser. They'll accept um they'll accept to like have all their data absorbed by the companies and the websites they visit. You know, like you give people a choice for privacy and they don't do it. Like this isn't an issue that can be fixed with better decision making, I don't think.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame. Who you got up next? I know you've got like a whole queue of debates. Who's next?
Oh, there's some Jimmy Dore guy. I'm not trying to kick you off or
Yeah.
anything. I just
No, I didn't think you were. No, I didn't interpret it that way.
oh, okay. Yeah, no,
I was
I
just.
just
I,
well, I agree that these systems should be democratized, nationalized, whatever. I don't think the TOS is really an issue. There are good TOSs and bad TOSs. Sure, I'll argue against the bad ones, but COVID misinfo or disinfo, I should
Let me
say.
ask you this about. So this is something that bugs me about TOS, and let me know if you agree. I don't. I think it's bullshit that that the companies can kick you off and not and tell you violate a rule, but not tell you what the rule was. I think that's bullshit, and I think that they should be forced to publicly give a reason for why you've been expelled and point to what in their TOS you violated.
Uh, I guess I don't think that'd be harmful. Sure, I don't know how much that'd change, but yeah, I guess I think I'd be fine with that. Yeah, I don't see how that could um make the world worse. I suppose, and it'd be funny
Yeah,
seeing
I
them
mean,
try to
I would
justify
say it
some
would make.
stuff.
I would say it would make the world better because we're imposing transparency on these companies, which is a goal that I think we should have in mind.
Yeah, I
I
don't know
say
how much
we,
it would
but you
change
know what I mean. I
because they
think.
could always throw it to something, right? I mean, some rules are so vague, harassment or whatever. So, but yeah, it'd be
Mhm.
funny to see some because sometimes there are these big band waves, you know, and it would be funny, especially
Yep.
like if they were like, because they do these Nazi purges on Twitter now and again, if they had that category, roll it all out for hate speech, or like maybe this person actually got banned for another thing, it'd be funny, transparency wise.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, anyway, I do appreciate you coming on. I guess I have to take a deep breath before I talk to this lunatic who emailed me. Up next.
I do appreciate you having me on, Vaush. It was fun.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, can I plug my shit?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'm just Logic Guy on Twitter. It's spelled funny, but whatever. You'll figure it out. And I have a YouTube channel that's like the same name, Logic Guy. It's a chat show. I have my friends and enemies on, and it's very grill pilled, and it's all about vibes.
Nice. We love vibes here. We're big vibers.
Cool,
Well,
man.
take care. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on. It was very good.
All right. Be well.
All right, take care.